So hello and welcome. Happy Friday. Today is Friday, September the 24th, and this is Backyard Beekeeping Questions and Answers, episode number 127. This is 62 degrees Fahrenheit outside right now, which is 17 degrees Celsius, and this is The Way to Bee. And I'm Frederick Dunn, and I'm glad you're here, whether you're listening as a podcast via Podbean or if you're watching right here on YouTube. If you have questions of your own, please write them down in the comment section below. And if you want to know what we're going to talk about today, please look at the video description. Also, for some valuable links that will give you further information about some of the things that we're talking about. So just a quick heads up here, the pollen and the nectar is still going strong here, even though the weather's cooling down fast. We're going to get those super warm days. We're going to get the normal days and the cold days and the cold nights. So things are really changing fast around here. And that's pretty much it. Let's jump right in with question number 1 from John Karcher from McLeansboro, Illinois. Let's see, it says here, question about 2021 swarms. In the spring, I asked if I did the right thing by moving 5 of the 7 queen cells to prevent secondary cast swarms. It says a prime swarm, then if there's multiple queens in the hive, they send out follow-up swarms, and those queens take off and they're not even mated. They're a bunch of virgins taken off with smaller followings of workers from that hive. And I had an issue with that previous year. Well, this year, the hive swarmed, and 2 weeks later, secondary swarm, even though there were only 2 queen cells. 3 more top bar hives did the same. May 5th, have a walk-away split, even swarmed once 2 months later. I recently had an August 23rd swarm with still no brood. Maybe too late for the DCA. For those of you who don't know, a DCA is a drone congregation area, and that's where the male bees from other colonies of bees congregate high in the air, and virgin queens fly out, and that's where they get their mating resources. That's where they mate with the drones that they don't know. They just met them that day, and they come back, mated forever, up to 20 of those things. Anyway, never had my hive swarm this much in my 4 years of beekeeping. There's plenty of room. Crowding should not be an issue. Normally they make 10 bars of brood. This year it's been 12 plus. Talking to 3 other beekeepers with 10 to 12 hives, they experienced almost 50% losses this past winter. We did have a week of very cold weather late in winter after the hives broke cluster. Don't know for sure what caused such losses for them. Can bees instinctively know it's been a bad year or winter for beehives, causing them to swarm more than usual? And do I have something else going on? Because of such swarming, honey harvest was less than half of normal, still wanting to leave plenty for the bees. What's up? Thanks. So everybody wants to know what's up when their bees swarm, and they've done everything they can to stop them. So here's something else I'm going to talk about. Swarming, everybody talks about it. Nobody wants to lose their bees. Up to 70% of the population of your beehive takes off with that prime swarm, and a prime swarm is the first one. Usually that's the resident queen. She's already mated, she's laying, she's good to go. As described here, she may be young, and off they go. So, and this happens to me too. It's not just beginning beekeepers. So you can do all the right things. You've expanded the colony, you've got resources, space available to them. You're watching the populations, you're keeping your mites under control so they're not under stress and everything else. Let's assume all that's right. And still, out of the blue, here they go, making those queen cells. So that's one of the reasons that we want to inspect the colonies too. We want to know if they're about to swarm. So this year, here in my apiary, I was really good at getting splits out of the swarms, those that were showing swarm potential by building queen cells. As soon as they started construction of a queen cell, and those were developing, that's when I did the splits, and it saved a whole bunch of bees. And they build up really fast. But here's the thing, not always are they swarming because you're a bad beekeeper. Sometimes they swarm because it's genetic. Some bees, when it comes down to the traits of the queens, if you look them up, and there are plenty of lists out there that break it down by stock of bees, and they'll say that they have a high propensity to swarm. Africanized honeybees, for example, will swarm even though there's lots of resources there. That's how they spread so fast. They reproduce the colony by making other colonies, and they send them out, and then those will reproduce, and those will reproduce, and on, and they exponentially take over an environment that they're in. So you can have bees that are already prone to swarm even though you've provided everything that you know to put in there. So it's not necessarily a fault. It can be genetic. This is why I've said in the past that if I'm reproducing from queens, although obviously when we're doing splits to stop swarming, we are pulling stock from the colony that's preparing to swarm. So there is potential there that hopefully we're watering down those genetics, but if that's a new queen that's less than a year old and we're already splitting the colony because they're about to swarm anyway, we are carrying on those genetics too. But what I like to breed from, my breeder colonies, my favorite ones, are the ones that are 2 years old as a queen. And by breeding from those, we at least work with some colonies that have those genetics and are less prone to swarm. But of course, what happens when they make a new queen? When they make a new queen and she flies out to get mated, we don't have control over those genetics. So what we're doing is contributing to those genetics, but again, they could come back and swarm out, within the next 6 or 7 weeks after they've started producing their own young again. So it's not always your fault. All you can do is statistically do what you know is best for the bees, provide them with enough space, make sure the entrance is not completely shut off with congestion from the bees coming and going, expand your colonies as the population increases, and then of course the reverse is true. We don't want them in a hive that's much larger than the population of bees. So you have to size it right. Expand and contract your hive boxes to match the size of the colony of bees that inhabit that box. So beyond that, you could just be dealing with genetics. Now, the other thing is some people often ask is, are they swarming because there's too much varroa or there's some kind of disease or something like that? Well, when those things occur and the pressure's on, or maybe you're one of those new beekeepers that's checking out your hive every 3 days, they can abscond. You can open it up and find that they're just gone. And this is where some of your early warning signs of that, a colony that's about to quit where they're living, they stop investing in infrastructure. There's no new wax. They're not drawing out comb. They're not storing resources. They've stopped storing nectar. They've stopped storing up pollen and things like that. So all of those indicate it's a colony that's no longer investing in the hive that they're currently residing in. So you need to watch it and maybe make some changes. Don't bother them so much. That might be part of it too, but that's absconding, which is different from swarming. Swarming is a split. Absconding is they hate you and they're gone. So that's just food for thought. I know you may have wanted more than that, but that's the first thing that comes to mind, and these are questions that don't always have answers. Question number 2 comes from Nancy in Harleysville, PA. Question part 1, do you consider late season swarms? See, everybody wants to talk about swarms right now. Do you consider late season swarms to be a cause from varroa? Or would you most likely be absconding? Part 2, so we answered that in the previous question. Part 2, are late season swarms due to overcrowding as are spring swarms? They can be, because what's happening this time of year? Okay, so Nancy's in Harleysville, PA. Here in PA, we have a massive nectar flow going on right now, and those of you who watched my video last week, I had one of my own colonies just get out of hand on me. First of all, it has brood disease, sac brood of all things. The varroa mites are concentrated now in the brood nest area because they're smaller brood, therefore the mites that are normally spread out throughout several brood frames are now concentrated on the small brood that does exist, and the colony is honey bound with 20 deep frames in it. So that's a horizontal Langstroth hive, known as a long lang. So anyway, congestion is part of it this time of year. You can have a swarm take off when the queen no longer has places to lay her eggs. It's time to go. There's too many bees in there. And the resources are dwindling. In other words, resources for the queen to lay eggs. A lack of real estate. So now you have 2 choices. If you're looking at your beehives right now, and this was the fix that I did for the long lang, that the queen did not take off. Everybody's good. By the way, that colony, I will bet you, is going to make it. So anyway, I went right in there right away, and I had to put in drawn comb. Not everybody has that. So if they're filling up all their available space with nectar, and they're running out of room for pollen, which is critical for the developing larva, and then you've got to have places for the queen to lay her eggs, which is normally next to the frames that are full of pollen. And we've got capped honey and everything else in there. So they built up so fast, it was actually pretty surprising. So now, either you've got drawn comb from past honey harvest, for example, that you could put. The best case scenario is you've got honeycomb that you harvested from that hive. If you've got capped honeycomb on that hive and they've got plenty of resources for winter, you can pull some of the capped comb, get over there, get that extracting done, uncap, spin, extract, put those frames right back in there. Now the bees have a place to put their nectar. It's already drawn, it's already used by bees, top area for the bees to put their nectar. Then we have to have drawn cells for the queen to start laying right now, because we're at a critical time. We're at the end of the year. And the bees have weeks left to do their final buildups. They're making their fat-bodied winter bees right now, so everything is critical. And they can get congested. They can split right now and swarm out, even though it makes no sense to us. We're in the last week of September here, and I've had it happen. Not this year, luckily, but it has happened, because this is a time for some colonies where they rapidly increase and the resources are rapidly filling the available space for them. So the congestion that occurs, and the bees are bearding on the front, but now we've got this conflict because we have these really cold nights. It was 50 degrees, 51 degrees Fahrenheit last night. So that's cold for the bees. They're in a loose cluster inside the hive, and they also want to push each other outside, which they don't want to do because it's cold. And that would free up the space inside for them to circulate the air so they can dehydrate the honey that they've got going on. And the honey's being capped right now. So this coming week is my last harvest week. And then we're collapsing down the colonies for winter. And we're going to make sure that the resources they do bring in are going to be to get them through winter. So here that's 50 to 100 pounds of surplus honey. I don't think they're going to need it. They've never used 100 pounds. So a single deep is about 40, a single medium box is about 47 pounds of honey, capped, fully drawn, wall-to-wall 10 frame. And that will get them through winter where I am. But they certainly can. You can have a late season swarm. The other thing is, when you look at your landing boards, are you still seeing drones out there? And I do. There's drones still on the landing boards. They're still flying. So they have, some of the colonies have started killing off their drones. That Long Langstroth hive wiped out 90% of their drones. All their drone frames, all their drone cells, which are much larger than the worker cells, are now full of nectar and being capped as honey resources for winter. So the drones are on their way out, but there are drones, so there could feasibly be a drone congregation area for a queen to fly out, get mated. But now look, where's she at? She's going to be having new hatched out brood in the end of October. So new queens right now, bad idea. If you lost a queen and you don't have a queen to replace them with, buying in a laying queen from a known breeder, this is actually not a terrible time of year to get one. If you can get one locally, that's going to be your best because it doesn't go through the stresses of shipping. Although now, with the temperatures a little cooler, we're not worried about the queen getting cooked in shipment, which happens more often than bees being chilled in shipment. So if you've lost a queen, you're going to be way ahead if you install a mated queen that's in lay of known genetics that should get you through winter. So, or you can, if your queen lost two, you can combine colonies. I think that was another question here today. Moving on, question number 3. This comes from David Shrewsbury. Earlier in the year, I had a double-story nuke colony that was growing. Double-story nuke is a nucleus colony, and they're normally 5 frames. So there's 2 5-frame boxes on each other. And I moved into a full-size 10-frame hive, and ever since then, they have been at a standstill. So it takes you back to one of my early responses. Watch out if they're not investing in the infrastructure inside the colony. So the other day, I did an inspection on the colony, and it set off a robbing event. I'm going to pause there because that's another thing we're going to talk about today. Robbing is on the rise right now because the resources in the environment are dwindling at the same time that we have a huge population of foraging bees because all the colonies built up to take advantage of the fall harvest. Now there's a bunch of unemployed foragers and they're looking to rip people off. They're looking to rob bees, other colonies. I'll talk a little bit about that later too. So, but when you open your hive and you pull apart frames and things like that, and you break open the cells of honey, that scent of honey gets into the air, and it's probably your own bees. They're going to be the first ones on the scene. They're trying to get right into that open hive, and they're going to exploit the fact that those are open and the guards are on the landing board, but you've pulled the lid, so now they have backdoor entrance to start a robbing frenzy. Once I realized what was going on, I quickly closed the hive top up and put the brick on the front of the reducer to close it off even more. That didn't seem to work, as the bees just started piling up on front to get in. Is it possible for a hive to survive a major robbing event if given enough sugar water to replace the honey that was robbed from them, or do you think that the robbing bees would kill the queen and the resident bees? Looking at the landing board, there isn't much activity, and I'm not sure of what little I'm seeing is robber bees or resident bees. I'm afraid to open the hive now out of fear that it would set off another robbing event. So the bees piling up and everything, first of all, the bees that are robbing are the attackers. Your bees are defending, so your bees, the ones that are attacking just to get in. In other words, the bees that are robbing a colony of bees are not going in there to kill a bunch of bees. First of all, they're all vegetarians. They don't care. They're not going to eat bees. They're not like wasps and hornets that would be trying to munch your bees and get away with larvae and things like that. So they're just trying to get in, and their target is your nectar resources. So they're after the honey. It's the biggest bang for the buck, one for one. They get that back to their colony, and there's no further processing really. They just have to get it to one of their storekeeper bees inside the hive, and they'll put it right in cells, and it's ready to cap because it's honey for honey. So they go nuts for it. So the fighting and the piling up in front of the hive, that's actually a good sign because it shows that your colony is still feeling that they can defend themselves and they want to defend it. Often when there's a colony that's lost its queen, for example, and all you have left are laying workers, they get a little attitude in there when you're doing an inspection. They have a different tone. They don't look settled, but they're also terrible at defending the colony. So they frequently get overwhelmed and they just get robbed out. Now, the question here was, how can they recover from this? Well, since the robbing event was started while you were doing inspection, it also means that you stop the robbing right away. It takes hours for bees, even with a full-blown, full open entrance. Let's say we were totally caught off guard. The full width of the landing board was wide open and a full load of honeybees could just pour in there and start robbing like crazy. I did an earlier video this year where we showed how long does it take, even if the entire comb is covered with bees, shoulder to shoulder, ripping off the caps and robbing the colony blind. Could they do it in a matter of minutes? No, it takes hours. So closing it off quick and stopping the robbing event, you've actually saved them piles of resources, because even though they might seem fever pitched to get back in there and get to that honey, I think you've done a really good job of stopping them. I don't think you lost that much. If you happen to have a hive scale, like some of the people that have Broodminder scales and things like that, you would know right away how many pounds of honey you lost. It's surprisingly little if you can stop the robbing right away. So, what else? I'm afraid to open the hive now out of fear that I could set off another robbing event. So let's say you have to look at your beehive. I got to get in there. I got to know what's going on. I have to know what the resources are. And if I pull it up, there's going to be a robbing event. So here's what I do. I get a spray bottle of 1-to-1 sugar syrup, and I put 2 teaspoons of Honeybee Healthy. It can be Pro Health. It can be Beekeeper's Choice. It can be your lemongrass oils, whatever you feel like you want to do. And in my own apiary, I go around and spray the fronts of every single hive in the apiary, because guess where the robbers are coming from? If they're on the scene that quick, those are your honeybees already, or your neighbors. So if you've got a friend that keeps bees right next door, advise that person to spray and help you out. Give them something to do. Make all those hives smell the same and give them something to clean up. So that will derail the robbers. Another way that you can do this too is, and I've done it in the past, is I started open feeding. So in other words, like I have to get into hives and I know that scent of honey is going to get into the air. So I go to my feeding station, which is always in the exact same spot. And it is upwind of the apiary. So the prevailing wind goes across the feeding station and then continues on, and the apiary gets the scent of whatever happens to be at the feeding station. So you can put out sugar syrup there at your feeding station and draw the foraging bees out, and while they're preoccupied at the feeding station, now you have less pressure on the hives that you hope to inspect. And that works for wasps and hornets too. So if you've got the European hornets, they're trying to predate on your bees. Although now they're going to be producing queens, and the queens are going to want carbohydrates, which means even the wasps and hornets are all after nectar as well. So once the queens are produced, they're trying to develop their fat stores so that they can overwinter as a solitary insect. Thank goodness the bees are communal, they're social insects, and so they benefit from one another. That's why honeybees survive in the same hive over and over. So you can create diversions that way, and then other beekeepers have done things like they go through and pop the lid on every hive they have. I don't necessarily recommend that, but it definitely puts them all kind of on alert within their own colony, and they're cleaning up their own mess, because when you pull your inner board, there's always burr comb up there this time of year, and you disrupt honey cells, and that starts to drip down into the hive. So now they're all consuming and rearranging their own honey stores. So those are several options that you have. You got to create a diversion, but you got to get in and you have to know the disposition of your bees before you go into winter, or it could be too late to fix a problem. And these are backyard beekeepers. Bigger operations, I'm sure, have their own methods for keeping everything safe. And here we go. Question number 4. Jason from Elk River, Minnesota. I have 2 flow hives, 2 deep boxes for each hive. I'm nervous about getting them through a long, cold Minnesota winter. Hastily, I ordered the BeeSmart insulated covers that you are trying, and was thus disappointed to hear in a later episode that they do not fit the hive boxes. So I have come up with a plan. I built a candy board 2 inches high, which will be used for emergency winter feeding, and I plan to put this on top of my flow brood boxes. This candy board will be standard Langstroth size, so the insulated covers should fit. I will top the insulated covers with the ultimate hive covers for even more insulation. I want to take advantage of the inner covers, convex water shedding undersides. And so when I make my candy boards, I will leave several gaps in the sugar on the outside edges of the candy board so any moisture can be shed down the sides of the hive. Sugar can also absorb some moisture as well. Is this a good idea? I would like to keep everything under my insulated inner covers if possible. Thank you for all you do. Okay, this is an easy one. So because I have flow hives as well, and it's true, the flow hives don't match up with the insulated inner covers by BeeSmart Designs. If only I had one around to show you. Oh, here it is. So this is what we're talking about. Insulated inner cover, BeeSmart Designs. And what the problem is see these little tips that stick out underneath here. These things are made for 8 frame and 10 frame standard Langstroth beehives. So when you go to put these on your flow hive, because now we're breaking down our flow hives, normally for my configuration, it's not a problem because I have a single deep 10 frame flow hive brood box, but then I put my own medium super on there, and that's full of honey for winter. And that's a Langstroth size box, so these fit the Langstroth box. If I had to put it straight on that single deep 10 frame flow hive box, it's off by 1/4 inch on the outside dimension, width-wise. And then that means these little nubs get in the way. Guess what the fix is? It's really easy. You take these little nubs here and you clip them off. So you clip 2 of them off, one side only. And then this side will clip and hold its position, and then this one will match any size box. It's that easy. Clip these on one side, and now it fits, and it'll sit straight on your second deep flow hive box. So it'll still work. It's not the end of the world. You can put this straight on there, but I do like the idea, by the way, of a feeder shim, little thin feeder shim that goes around there to make room for not only people that are wanting to use these winter patties and things like that. I don't personally use them. So I'm just saying that you don't often have the space right on top of the backs of your frames on the bottom box to put winter feed or even treatments like Formic Pro and things like that that have to have a space on top of your brood frames, and then your next box to sit on that without pushing up on the frames in the box above it. So we need space for that. So sometimes having a little shim that's described here is beneficial for a lot of reasons. But this year, all of my hives except for the long hives. So my Layens hive and my Langstroth hive will not have this insulated inner cover on it, although their covers are insulated. These insulated inner covers will sit there, and Jason says he's going to also have the Be Smart Designs Ultimate Hive Cover, they're called, and they have an airspace in them, and they're angled and designed to sit straight over the top of this. So there you go. But also, if you wanted to use your feeder shim, you could put it up on top of here around this edge, and you can put your feet up in here and just take this black cap off. If you're not putting a feeder on it, you take this cap and you put it over the center hole, and it's closed up. R10 insulated. Last winter, I used insulated B-Max covers on all my hives. So I even took the gabled tops off of all of my flow hives, and I put a B-Max insulated R10 cover on there. Now they're going to get double insulation on top. Be Smart Designs insulated inner covers, and then the B-Max insulated outer covers. Although if you have the Be Smart Designs plastic covers, they're totally compatible. And so that's a fix for that. Very easy to do. And the bees will glue it right up along the edges, just like they do everything else. So clipping those little posts there is not a problem. Get your side cutters out and go after it. Next question, number 5, is from Scott Fortune. Fred, can you review for us, new beekeepers, the different things we need to be doing to our hives to prepare for robbing season and winter? Seen a number of people confused or unaware about the robbing season and how to prepare for it, as well as how their hives should be set up for winter. I know each area will be different depending on temperatures, but please do it for your area. Okay, well, first of all, I've already done it for my area, and it's called Cold Weather Beekeeping. I did it for the Flow Hive community and some others, because I'm also one of the educators at thebeekeeper.org. And what I'll do is I'm going to link the video so you can see how I configure 3 different hive designs for wintertime. But I will talk about what we do for the entrance reduction, for example. And that's your number 1 line of defense this time of year, and it needs to happen. If you haven't done this already and you're in the Northeast, you need to get on it right now, because I go out and watch, there's fighting on every single landing board. But what I do see is that the foragers that are trying to get in that don't belong to those colonies, they're not making it past the guards. But we have to help the guards. And we do that by giving them a smaller area to defend. So this is my winter. If you had, for those of you who have late season swarms, this is the size entrance that I'm talking about for those. Nice wooden entrance that is very tiny, and it's only 3/8 of an inch high. Why is it 3/8 of an inch high, you might want to know? And that's because mice can't get under it. Meadow mice, deer mice, and maybe a vole, if it was really trying to get up there, they can't climb very well. Shrews can actually get in the smallest hole, and they're hunters, but I've never had a shrew in one of my beehives. So what we have are the meadow mice, the voles, and the deer mice. None of them can get through the 3/8 inch height opening, no matter how wide it is. And we owe that research to a brilliant YouTuber named Matthias Wendell, by the way. He's a good guy. So then you can have it 2 inches wide if it's a full-size colony, and have this black area indicates, of course, the space that would be open. 2 inches wide, 3/8. And you can flip these upside down like this and put those in your entrance. And that's so that when you get dead bees in the winter, we're all going to get dead bees inside your hives when they can't fly out. And then that leaves you an open space up above for them to climb over and still get out. So we've already said that I don't do any top venting. I don't do any top entrances. So you also need to be prepared to keep your entrances clean through winter. So as the bees die and pile up on the front of your beehive on the inside, you may not see it. So you need tools and you need ways. I mean, I use shish kebab sticks and all kinds of stuff. I do have another tool that just came out that's just for clearing out dead bees in wintertime. So you need to be able to do that. I don't insulate my hives. I'm in what's considered agriculture zone 4. So just the insulation around the sidewalls is the wooden construction of the hive. So my covers are insulated. That's the most important thing. And and interestingly enough, you may be wondering, hey Fred, why were you holding up the American Bee Journal in the opening picture today? And that's because they backed up thank goodness, all the stuff I've been telling people about the insulated inner covers and not having a top vent and why. There are reasons why we don't want the warm, humid air venting out of the inside of your beehive into the atmosphere. I know that there's a whole bunch of people that love to have quilt boards and everything else, and we just had a beekeeper's breakfast this week, and a lot of people put a lot of effort and design and work into putting up elaborate absorbent material boards on top of their beehives. I know so what I'm sharing with you is what I do and why I do it, but I'm not telling you if what you're doing is working for you, and it has for many years. There may not be any reason to change, but when we go all the way back to 2008, I had upper vents, I had upper entrances. There were studies that were done up in Canada that showed that that was beneficial to the bees and beneficial to the bee population and everything else. And but there are other things at play. There's other dynamics at play. So if your hive top is not insulated and you just have a standard inner cover and a standard outer telescoping cover, all made out of wood, no added insulating material, and then you've got your regular bee box, well, if you had a tiny top vent, that did not make much of a difference. But your bees certainly had to have a bunch of winter resources so that they didn't starve out, which used to happen a lot. They were all tucked in into their cells, their abdomens were contracted, they weren't well fed, and they weren't moving freely around because it was so cold in there. They stayed tightly clustered and did not survive winter often. So I really encourage you to get this American Bee Journal number 160 or 161, number 10, October 2021 issue. And what you're going to do is look at the article by John Gaut, G-A-U-T. But anyway, they talk about the benefits of the insulating covers, very technical, very involved as far as the thermodynamics inside the hive, and what happens with the humidity. So if we've got this year, see these insulated inner covers, didn't have them last year. So BetterBee.com sells telescoping metal insulated covers. It's got the metal cladding, it's wood, and it's got insulation inside of it. And so there's an outer cover that's insulated being sold by Better Bee, but the outer covers that I prefer are the $19 Bee-Max covers. So then we have the Bee Smart Design insulated inner cover that came out. And so I'll be having that, and then my Bee-Max covers on the outside of that. So I'll have an R20 on top of the hives. So we'll see how that goes. But it's looking good because the science that gets reported here is very interesting. You may have heard me mention in the past that the high humidity levels inside the hive and the low oxygen levels up where the cluster is may be benefiting the bees in ways we're not aware of. So the high humidity, I put humidity sensors in 10 of my hives last winter, and I wanted to see, first of all, it would indicate temperature and humidity. So if we had a 25-degree Fahrenheit day outside and I looked at that temperature sensor, which was way up in the top in the feeder shim, it wasn't even down where the brood would be. So I had in the 80s relative humidity, and the temperature would be in the 30s up there, even though it's 20-something outside. So that tells me my bees are alive. The other thing was that there were studies that were done, and even before this article came out, there were studies that were done on the humidity levels having a negative impact on the Varroa destructor mite. So when I had these high humidity levels, that has an impact on the mite's ability to reproduce in the winter brood that your bees start to build starting in the first of the year normally. So around here in February, they're building brood already. So listen to this nonsense. I'm sorry, listen to this science of this. If the relative humidity, because you're venting off through the top, which reduces the humidity, which is the whole point of top venting. They're certainly not doing it trying to get rid of warmth inside the hive. They do it to get rid of the humidity, which I don't agree with. We don't want to get rid of humidity because the bees need water in winter. Where they don't need the water is directly over the cluster. How do we keep the water from forming directly over the cluster? By having an insulated top and cooler sides where the dew point happens and condensation occurs, and the bees don't have to risk life and limb to go outside to get water to bring it into the hive. Instead, they get it right on the interior wall of the hive and they bring it into the cluster. But anyway, at 59 to 68% relative humidity, and this is according to the article and the referenced scientific studies that are referred to in the article, 53% of the varroa destructor mites were able to produce offspring. The next part of the study is 79 to 85% relative humidity, which is exactly where my beehives were last winter. 2% of the mites in that hive were capable of producing offspring. So 53% compared to 2%. This can have a lot to do with two things. One, that we did an oxalic acid vaporization treatment when all of the hives had their brood at the smallest levels, which was the end of November, first week of December. Last year we had a warm day and we could do it. Doesn't do you any good if it's really cold and your bees are tightly clustered. So if you get one of those warm days, mid-60s to 70s, that's a great opportunity to treat. And then we partnered that with the fact that we insulated all the hives last winter on the top only, and the only entrance is on the landing board. Then we ended up with these high humidity levels inside the hive, which benefited the bees by giving them hydration, which is critical to their survival, and their ability to feed their own brood in winter with the bee bread that they have. If they don't have water, they can't process and produce feed out of the bee bread, which is your pollen stores, in order to kick off those early brood. See what I'm saying? So this is great. Great article, not just because it reinforces what I've been sharing with you based on the reading that I've done. You should know that I don't put a bunch of information out there unless I'm doing research on my own as well. So, insulating, I'm leaving at least 50 to 70 pounds on. So I always have my configuration here is a deep for the brood and the resources that they're building up this time of year. And then I have a medium box on top of that, 8 or 10 frame. They seem to both get through winter equally. One of my strongest colonies is actually an 8 frame, so that made almost no difference. The bees that actually came out in the spring with the strongest numbers in the hives were also south or southeast facing. And so that's another part of it, where you're putting your hives. So we have to consider too that where I live, there's a snow melt. So elevating your hives, and the reason I elevate is because I have skunks that can stand on their tiptoes and get at the bees. So my magic number is 18 inches AGL, which stands for above ground level. So the hives are tilted towards the landing board. That landing board, where the entrance is 18 inches or more. This also benefits your bees in the wintertime when they have to do what? When they have to go out and take a cleansing flight. So when your bees zip out to make a cleansing flight, if your hives are basically sitting on the ground already, they hit a whiteout, they hit the snow, they buzz around on their backs, and maybe they get chilled too fast and they can't make it back to the landing board and get back in the hive. The higher they are up in the air, the quicker they get out. They don't crash land right away, and you'll see that they'll be able to make a U-turn after they eliminate. They drop their waste on the snow. That's why you're going to see little tan wet spots on the snow, and then the bees, you'll see them get right back in the hive unless there's something wrong with them. If it's a sick bee, if there's some kind of disease going on in that colony, you'll see lots of bees flying out and just dying and not coming back. Don't panic if you see kind of a shotgun of dead bees in the snow out away from the hive. Bees would rather die outside the hive because their goal is not to contaminate it. So it's actually a good sign. I know this is kind of conflicting information, but spread out shotgun dead bees in the snow is not terrible. It's if you have piles of dead bees immediately outside the hive that you probably have a problem. So the bees don't want to die inside the hive. They also don't want to defecate inside the hive. So they fly out and either eliminate in the snow and come back, or they keep right on going and they die because it's the end of their life anyway, and their goal is to keep the interior of that hive clean for the rest of the colony to make it. So higher they are, better their chances are if they're trying to get back that they can get back. Let's see, so read those articles, really good stuff. Insulated covers, NOAA prevents, have robbing screens handy, by the way. If you don't, be ready for robbing. This is probably the most popular. I asked everybody yesterday, was it yesterday or the day before, to raise their hands if they had seen this. Half the group new about the BeeSmart designs. These are the same people that are making the insulated inner cover, but these robbing screens are very important to have around because they come with little pins that come with them. You can have this on the shelf. If you don't have the stuff and you suddenly need it because a robbing event is happening, you're scrambling around like a chicken with your head cut off, trying to do something to stop the robbing. So you're just closing up the entrance. Well, this can be pushed right up against the entrance right away. The robbing can stop, and the resident bees come out, open one side or the other, and let your resident bees come out and do their work. And also bees that are returning that were foraging can come back and get in there. You can put these on just because it's seasonal and you've got a small colony of bees that needs to be defended. But, see, I have to throw another but in there. We're also doing this year these hive gates. So if you don't know about that and you're concerned about robbing, none of the colonies, even those late season swarms that I've hived, and I'm pretty darn happy about this, I look at these several times a day at the landing board activity. No robbers are getting in these. And those little jerk yellow jackets that are flying around when it's really cold out, like this morning it was really cold, the yellow jackets are flying and the honeybees can't yet. They go and they fly right into the little wooden entrances like these, because here's the distance. The yellow jacket gets on the landing board, scoots along, it's freezing cold, there's no bees out on the landing board because they're all clustered inside. It gets inside, as soon as it gets inside here, it runs along the inside, up the wall, gets in there and starts getting the resources of the bees, and then they get out of there before the bees can wake up and do anything about them. Guess where the yellow jackets are not doing that? And that's what these things were designed for in the first place. These hive gates with their narrow entrance and their long corridor, yellow jackets, I've seen them go in and I'm like, it's getting in there. And then, it comes right back out. Good move. These things are working. And so a lot of people have them and really happy about the feedback we're getting because some people actually, I didn't even realize how many people that keep bees in Washington State lose a percentage of their colonies annually just to the wasp attacks. I didn't know that. Yellow jackets. So these are helping them, and I can't wait to see those reports because it's all really good news, and I'm glad to see a new invention work for the better. So that's the other thing. And then if you've got screened bottom boards on your hives, make sure that those are closed. Because this time of year when things are cooling down and there's honey being produced inside the hives and there's that honey vent, that scent is in the air, one of the places that the smell of those resources comes out is through the screen on the bottom board. And people say, well, what does it matter? The bees can't get in through there. No, but what it does is that scent travels through the air and goes a long distance, and those colonies that have screen bottom boards without the inserts are spreading the scent, and that gets a lot of attention from robbing wasps, robbing bees, and those big European hornets too come around that hive. So it puts pressure on the hive that's unnecessary, where if the only scent were coming out of the entrance, which hopefully by now is reduced. And that's another thing I also did in the long Langstroth hive, which had a 6-inch, half-inch high entrance. I've reduced that down to a 3-inch wide, half-inch high entrance, and that's also cut down a lot of the robbing attempts there. So those are my pointers for that. Question number 6. Question number 6 comes from Rodney Dahl. You can see pollen on the legs of bees, but how can you tell if they're bringing in nectar? Well, one of the things is you can physically look at the bee. You can see what the length of their abdomens are. When bees are coming in loaded with nectar, and you see pollens on the legs of those bees, when you see pollen balls on the corbicula, which are the hind legs and have the special designed little pocket there to handle those, what people call pollen pants, the little balls of pollen, they do a lot of things that let you know that that pollen source also provided them with nectar. One is they fly in heavy. I have the advantage of doing super slow motion sequences, so I see the bees that come in and they're just barely making it to the landing board. Another bee collides with them and that bee is just exhausted and falls to the ground. This is also why this time of year we get a lot of bee drift. And that means that that heavy loaded bee with nectar and pollen on board comes to the first hive on a line of a whole bunch of hives. So if you're one of those beekeepers that likes all your hives to look the same and you line them all up in a single row, and you're going to find out that your end hives start picking up more resources and more bees this time of year. That's because they're loaded with resources and they don't make it all the way home. They land on another hive and get welcomed in because they're bringing gifts. So you look at the abdomen of the bee. Is it nice and fully extended? Because they stay out long enough to get as much of the resources as they can in a single flight. Bees are very efficient. They don't go out and get a little nectar and a little pollen and then zip right back home. So they wait until they're loaded to the max from either of those resources. So either their legs have huge pollen globs on them, or they have pollen and their abdomens are fully extended. So you can just look at them and know. And it's also how you know if the bees that are in your colony are well nourished, the ones that come out on the landing board. Look at the length of their abdomens, because they slide, it contracts. You have these sliding plates, and if they're fully extended, plus you can see light through the abdomen where the crop is. The crop, if you don't know, is when the bees go out they collect water, they collect nectar, or they collect honey. Maybe they're a robber. And that goes into the crop. And that does not enter the midgut, because it doesn't enter the ventricula, because there's a valve there that keeps it from going in. So it's not even digested. There are enzymes going on, but it does not enter the digestive parts of your bee's abdomen. So when they fill those up, and bees that are collecting water are not collecting nectar for obvious reasons, because the nectar would be diluted by water and they're after the maximum sugar for the buck. The biggest bang for their buck, the biggest sugar load for their trip. And then like if you've got ragweed, for example, sometimes your bees will be on ragweed and that is not giving them any nectar, it's just giving them pollen. Sometimes they just go for pollen. But right now, Maximilian sunflowers, you can hear them before you see them, almost, even though you see them way across the field. Bees are all over those. Bees are all over the cosmos still. Those are going to bloom right into October. That's why I say we've still got weeks left for the bees to recover from the honey that you're about to take off, although never remove so much honey from a colony that if we had bad weather from here on out that they wouldn't make it. So leave that 50 to 100 pounds of honey on if you're in the Northeast like where I am. You want to make sure that they have the resources they need. Don't plan on them being able to replenish what you take off. So that's how you can tell. Look at the bees. Look at the physical load of the bees. And this is Rodney again. How did Rodney get away with 2 questions? I'm slipping up. Rodney Dahl, question number 7 here. I'm not going to hold you to any results from this, but I think I would like a what would you do situation. 2 of my Layens hives that were new this year seemed to swarm a bit late. One of them has a new queen, and I see 0 brood as of today, September 19th. Swarmed around the 5th, I think, so we're the 5th to the 19th after the swarm. And the other one has some brood in it, but maybe left over from before. The resources are low, and their numbers are low from what they were in the summer. I'm considering combining the hives. Guess my question is, would you give that a try and hope for the best? And if so, should I wait a little bit later into the fall and see where they go, or just get it done now? I'm going to need to wait till I can verify which one is good laying queen. The workers are still bringing in resources. Upstate New York is going to be cooling off this week. So we're in upstate New York. We got one that is not bringing in resources and one that is. And I would do a complete inspection to make sure that I had a laying queen. If she is not laying by the end of this coming week, I'd combine them. I would. So if she's not laying, put a divider board in the hive that has the strong colony in it, that has the laying queen, and install your other bees. That divider board would have screens on both sides of it. So here's your entrance, here's your resident colony, because this is a horizontal hive format. So you got the divider board, put your new colony that you're putting in that does not have a viable queen with them right next to it, and then they'll be able to smell each other, get acquainted with that scent over about 72 hours. And then, and by the way, it was one of my viewers that said, hey Fred, the screening board thing. So if you had a screen, you had the divider board, follower board, which allows you to create divisions within these horizontal hives. And then my recommendation was to put number 8 screen on both sides of it. But then my viewer said, get one of those circle controls and put that on the board, on one on each side. And then you can open it up so that it's venting, and then when the time comes to mix the two gradually, you can just open the little round opening that lets the bees through a little at a time. Darn, I don't have one of those here, but I think you know what I'm talking about. They it has the fully open setting, it has a vented setting, it has a queen excluder setting, and then it has the closed setting. So that to me was better than screens. Drill yourself an 1.5-inch diameter hole or whatever the hole diameter is for that wheel, and then put it on the vented setting for both sides of that and use that to introduce and eventually combine your two colonies. And I think that would work fantastic. So, and I'm sorry I don't remember the viewer's name. But yeah, this time of year, so I would give them this coming week and then make that change. Because now we're going to benefit. We're going to double their resources. We're going to bring the resources with them from your other hive. Like my Long Lang, I could do that and add a huge number of resources, bees, brood, everything in there if I wanted to suddenly build it up. But what I'm trying to do is salvage what I have and see how they make it. And they're kind of a project right now. So I don't want to do that. But if I had a colony that I was concerned that was going to just dwindle and die out, I would definitely, once after I've done an inspection to make sure everything is healthy in there, and, check brood and everything else, then I would go ahead and combine them in the way described. Rodney, sneaking 2 questions in there. Question number 8. Brad Oliphant. About the stored sugar syrup. Will the bees cap stored sugar water? And this is a transition that we're making now. So in the spring, we know that we use 1-to-1 sugar syrup. So that's by weight. These are not critical. It's not chemistry to where you have to be right down to the micro ounce. But if you do 2-to-1, so now if we're doing a gallon of fresh water, we're going to heat that up. We're going to turn that into sugar syrup. We're going to take 8 pounds of sugar, dry sugar, and we're going to mix that. We're going to heat it up. And then that 2-to-1 actually gets stored by the bees. So the question here about will they store the syrup? Will they cap the stored sugar water? Yes, they do. Because they're going to treat it just like honey. It has a high sugar content. They're late in the year. They're going to transfer it from bee to bee, of course. There's trophallaxis. We're going to have the storekeeper bees taking it from the field bees and everything else. Even inside the hive, when they have a feeder like that, bees are taking it from the feeder, and then you're going to see them transferring that to the storekeeper bees that will put it in the cells. And in some cases, it goes to more than one different storekeeper bee, and then they'll put it in the cells to dehydrate it down, and then they'll cap it, just like they do regular honey. That's why we don't feed sugar water when we're going to take the honey off for human consumption, because it's just sugar water honey. And so, yeah, they cap it. Absolutely. Question number 9. Carol Wilkins. You helped me May or June, and it worked! Exclamation point. See, I helped somebody, and it worked. In my nukes, there were swarm and supersedure cells, and when I put them in the hive, they kept building and capping supersedure and swarm cells. As you advised, I put the queen in a nuke with capped brood, nurse bees, and resources. I reunited them about a week later via newspaper. This is now my strongest hive. It never swarmed! Exclamation point. Of course I will split them in spring. Thank you. I do have a question. How do you push the frames back in place after inspection? My bees come climbing up in clusters no matter how much or little smoke I use. Same when I try to put a box back on the hive. I try to put a box on the back edge and slowly push in place, but the bees are flooding out no matter how little or smoke I use, and I've tried to brush them off the front edge, but they quickly come right back out. Okay, well, first of all, I'm really glad that the advice I gave helped, and thank you for that feedback. With my Long Langstroth hive, I now have these little they're called Shark portable vacuums, and they really suck as vacuums. See what I did there? Anyway, so they suck as a portable battery-powered vacuum. They're supposed to be, like for cleaning your car and stuff like that. And because its suction is so low, it's really good for collecting up the straggler bees. Like before I want to close up my Long Langstroth hive, the ones that are out on top of my cover boards, before I go to close it, I just take that vacuum and I suck those all right up. And then it has a holding containers. So you just open that up and I lean it against the landing board and then those bees all go out, and it hasn't killed a bee yet. So that's one thing that I like to do. The other thing is, so here's my model beehive. And what I like to do is move all the frames together. So in other words, when I'm doing an inspection, right? When I move frames over, I always pull out at least 1 or 2 frames when I do my inspections, and you have a frame holder that's on the side of your box, and there they hang. So usually they don't have a lot of bees on those because those are the end frames, and for me that would be the west side of the hive would be the least finished and the least populated by bees. Then as I do my inspection, I just slide frames over one by one, right? And then the concern is, of course, bees now get between the space where the frames are open. So, but when I'm done with my inspection, so I go as far as I need to go, get the information I need to get, and then I get out of there. Unless there are conditions it requires to do a complete evaluation. But let's say we're stopping here now. Now I've got bees in here. But if I go like this, the bees are constantly in the way of each frame as it goes. I always push the frames together. We had this frame that was by itself, but we push them, and I do one side at a time. And then I bring them in, and I close them up. That way you're not constantly opening and closing between each frame. You're moving your frames as groups. Once you're done, you push them all over as a group. And then I like to, of course, once I get the last frame back in there, well, these are the same no matter which side is up. That's interesting. Okay. So once all the frames are in there, then I think about the fact that I'm going to be back next time. So I'll push them all towards the middle. And when it comes to all the bees being annoying and having a lot of bees in the way, the only other thing I have to say about that is, what time of day are you doing your inspections? So we want to do it between, let's say, 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. We want to do this on really hot days, so more bees would be outside anyway, and more of your foragers would be gone. So this facilitates your ability to look at the brood, look at the resources in the hive, and see lots of bees. And maybe if you're super lucky, you'll get to see your queen as well. So get into your hive at a time of day when most of the bees are foraging. So that's the other end of it. And as far as it sounds like you're doing everything the way I would do it anyway, when you come to pushing, when you put your boxes on, some people put them diagonal from one another and they really slowly turn them like that until they line up. I like to start at the back and I slide them forward until they line up, and then that last little guillotine area here, we've got the box below and the bees are still up there. Blow on them with your breath and get them down there, and then scoot them on up there. Shimmy it, and you can get them out of the way and not kill many bees. The other thing that you can do, and this also helps for the people that are worried about robbing, this is cotton duck canvas. Now I know they sell this stuff as a beehive cover, because underneath, like if you've got the migratory covers and things like that, lays right on top of the back of your frames like this, and then you put your migratory cover on top of that, which is just a flat board, and it's usually got a piece of wood on the front and the back. That facilitates running all your hives together on the side so they have communal warmth and things like that. But this also helps with robbing, so you can peel it off as you go and do your inspections just like that. And then as you go back the other way, you can peel it off this way. But here's the good news. When you're using something like this and you're trying to close things up, the bees are already down under your canvas, and then you put your cover on. That only works, of course, on the top box. Doesn't work on the bottom brood box, unless you just want to use one of these as a cover while you're doing an inspection to help cut down on robbing, for example. The other thing is, always carry a container with you and scrape off burr comb, and if you're going to be scraping off, honey-filled cells and things like that, have a nice clear container with a lid that you can throw all that stuff in as you go, scraping it in there. So that's why I use 2 hive tools, so that I can scrape them against each other to get those things off into that bin. And then I close that up, and that keeps bees out of that too, and it also keeps the honey scent out of the air. So this also serves to help keep the honey scent out of the air. So I hope that was helpful. And let's see. That's about it for that. So you can vacuum off the stragglers. That's the other thing that you can do, and then release them in direct contact with your landing board. So what else do I have here? Oh, there's an oxalic acid vaporization. We're in the fluff part, by the way. That was the last question. So also, back to the same American Bee Journal issue here. Randy Oliver published a update here. The USDA has passed the ball to us beekeepers. The new changes to the oxalic acid label. But there's stuff that I want you to be aware of on here. So we know that we got approval to use oxalic acid vaporization on colonies with honey supers in place. And remember, state departments of agriculture can still put tighter constraints on the use of oxalic acid. But the very first direct quotations in italic here, the very first article, paragraph that I want you to hear about is the important change as far as U.S. beekeepers is, and please listen to this, because there's a lot of people just doing whatever they want to do with oxalic acid. Oxalic acid can be used when honey supers are on the hive. That is the biggest thing. That was the biggest bonus right now, and we always kind of felt that was coming. Unfortunately, though, Randy Oliver says, the label change does not include using OA dissolved in glycerin. So if you've seen studies or tests or field studies of people using glycerin with oxalic acid and using that to apply it to the bees as part of a dribble, that is not approved, period. Illegal, in parentheses. It also says so the glycerin for that solution dribble method is illegal, and the extended release pad method is illegal. So if you're going to take your oxalic acid and you're going to mix it with glycerin and you're going to put that on bits of sponge or shop towels, or a lot of these were studies that were done by Randy Oliver, he has an exception. He has our research authorization to use that stuff. So please follow labels. Please only use what's legal, and use the administration methods of any miticide that has been approved and only in the legal way. So you can't use this extended release dribble methods, glycerin, pads, shop towels, things like that. None of that's approved. So you still have to use it the way it's been used in the past. And the only concession is that now we can use it with the honey supers on. But remember, it only works really when the brood is small. It is not going to treat for Varroa destructor mites underneath the cappings of capped pupae. So we have to pay attention to that. But anyway, great article, Randy Oliver, read it all. Always, especially if you're giving advice to others, make sure that the advice you're giving is legal. So even though we may have found our own ways to make things work differently, if we're educating others, that's what we have to do. So this is a great issue of the American Bee Journal. And I'll put a link to the American Bee Journal. If you're not a subscriber already, that's one of the ones that I think you should subscribe to. There's lots of great information. It seems to come out just at the right time, too, when I'm about to talk to something. So I'd like to invite you to join us on Facebook. We have two groups there. One is for the HiveGate group, and I'll put a link to that down in the video description. The other thing is the Way to Bee Fellowship, and you can join that. These are private groups, so people on the outside that are not members can't see what's being posted. They can't see who the members are and things like that. We don't tolerate rudeness. We don't tolerate mean people. We don't tolerate spamming. So it's a fun place to share information, get information from your peers all over the world. So thanks for watching. I hope you learned something here today, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend with your honeybees. Thanks a lot.